Hello, everybody, and now welcome to Chapter 1. Finally, at last, we're moving into the main part of the textbook now. So, with that, let's go ahead and get started. And I want to say that this Part A, as well as Part B, are pretty short, but then Part C will be quite long. So, there'll be three parts altogether for this chapter again. But the third one is really the biggie. Okay, so first of all, the textbook opens this chapter by talking about goals, macro goals. What are the goals that society has for its economy? And then you also have personal goals. You have personal economic goals. Just about everybody does. And I invite you to think about them. The textbook has a nice discussion of it, and I don't think I really need to say much more, except for one important thing. And I've already said this before, and I'll keep saying it again, that ultimately the primary goal of every economy isn't to help people make money. It isn't about getting rich. It's really about human well-being. It's enhancing and promoting human well-being of the members of any particular society, or all of humanity if we're thinking about a global economy. And money is a means to that end, but it's only one of them. So the broadest goal, the one we think about when we talk about the economy, is in fact doing everything we can to enhance our well-being. Okay, let me move along. Do you have other personal goals as well as their social ones? Okay. Now, the book talks about macroeconomics in context. Our course is called Macroeconomics in a Global Context. What are we talking about here? Well, there's social context. There's political. Let's just take those two for a moment. First of all, no two economies are exactly alike. Every country's economy is a little bit different, and it largely reflects the society that every country has. Same thing with political systems. They very definitely provide the foundation for the economy. And not only are they different from one place to another, they're also different over time. The economy we have today is very different from the one that we had in, say, 1776 when our country first declared its independence. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of them certainly are technological, but that's not the whole story. Our society is different. Just for example, how an economy is different in a place like the United States or much of Western Europe, where women can and do hold various kinds of jobs and professional positions. Compare that with, say, the economy of Saudi Arabia, where women can't even drive. Okay, that's got to be a different kind of economy. And so it is. And likewise, there's very much of a political underpinnings in terms of the regulations we have, in terms of what we encourage, what we don't. For example, the economy of the South in the United States before the Civil War, when slavery was legal and there were all kinds of social institutions that supported that, it was a very, very different economy. Okay, let me move on. Environmental. There's the whole physical environment plays a huge role in what kind of economy we can have. And so there's that. And last but not least, history. You know, every country has had a somewhat different history. And as a result, what we have now is quite different. Just as a small example, for example, labor unions were very strong historically, have been very strong for, say, the last 30 years, 40 years in Germany. And the result is a society in Germany that's much more labor friendly than in the United States. So all these things play a role, and they all interact with each other as well. And we ignore that as our peril. Economies simply do not exist in a vacuum. They can't. Some economists rather, like to think that's true. It's not. So let's move on to the next slide, where we're trying to encapsulate all of this into one graph that the textbook provided. I just changed the colors a little bit. All right, so we're looking at social and environmental contexts of economic activity. So around the outside, I've got the physical context, and then let me grab this. Inside the big ring are the social and political context, and then inside this square is economic activity. Now these three spheres, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. These three spheres we'll talk about a little bit later. They're different parts of economic activity. Now, looking at these arrows, there's natural inputs coming in from outside. There's flows of natural and recycled resources, and there's environmental services, all of which we'll talk about a little bit later. Now, output. These are products that are going out into the social and political context, but there's also pollution and waste that go into the larger environment. And we hope that some of that pollution and waste gets turned into recycled resources and it comes back around. I just didn't want to draw another arrow in there because it wouldn't be so pretty. Okay, so that's a very nice way of encapsulating. Now, moving on. There's a very important link between production and income that I spoke to briefly earlier. But it's important because we're going to, when we talk about GDP, we're going to use, sometimes it means income and sometimes it means production. And so we need to be sure we're clear on that. So, hey, the light bulb here. It's simple, really. People get paid for their participation in the production process. Therefore, the total value of all the production is roughly the same as total income. So we can use the two terms interchangeably, and we will. So on the next graph, this is the famous circular flow diagram that every macro class in the world forever, more or less, teaches. And I want you to memorize this thing. So let's take a look at the different pieces of it. First of all, around the outside is physical things or services, not money. All right? You get up in the morning, you live in a household, and you go over to your job and where you work, and you help produce things. And all the different ways that you are working are all one way or another contributing to the production process. And therefore, we have a whole bunch of produced goods and services. They go into markets, and then they get sold back to households. All right? Now, it's more complicated than that, but that's the basic, most fundamental flow. And you notice it's a closed circle. Okay? Now, there's another circle that goes in the opposite direction, and that's to pay for all those things. Okay? So I started out by saying you get up in the morning and you go to work, and in return, you get paid wages. Other households might provide natural resources, or perhaps land, or perhaps even rental buildings. Okay, those are provided, and they're paid for with one form or another of rent. Other households are also providing financial capital and other kinds of capital. We'll talk more about that later. And in return, they get paid either interest, if it was for loans, or profits, if it was a business. Okay, looking at the bottom half of this. Okay, again, you and I and everybody else is helping to produce goods and services that end up in households, but then the households then pay for those. And so basically what we're saying here is the dollar value of all the dollars that got circulated here is basically equal to the value of all these things that got produced there. It's kind of an obvious thing once you start to think about it. But some more things about this are not going to be so obvious. Okay, bye for now. So that was brief. We're going to continue on to now section B, and then we'll go from there. But again, the last one is going to be the long one. Okay, let's close that, and we're done for now.